greater than or equal to would be a closed circle. And if negative 2 is greater than or equal to w, means negative 2 is the bigger number. We want the smaller numbers for w, and the smaller numbers would go to the left. Last problem for the section. We have negative 5 over 7, x greater than negative 5. This time we have a fraction with two numbers that we want to get rid of. If you remember from previous chapters, we can multiply by a fraction to cancel out this fraction. And the fraction we'll multiply by is called the reciprocal, where we flip the fraction upside down. So instead of 5 over 7, we'll make it 7 over 5. And we want to also cancel out the negative, so we'll make it a negative 7 over 5. And again, we'll multiply both sides by negative 7 over 5. On this problem, the 5s would cancel, the 7s would also cancel, and the negatives would cancel. So we'll be left with x. Keep in mind we multiply by a negative number. Anytime we multiply by a negative number, the inequality will flip around. Multiplying a number times a fraction, we can make them both fractions by putting a 1 on the bottom. Multiplying the numerators, negative 5 times negative 7 would be 35. Multiplying the denominators, 1 times 5 would be 5. And if you divide those out, we'll have x is less than 7. Graphing this, we'll put 7 in the middle number line. 8 will go on the right, and 6 will go on the left. Less than means it's a open circle. And x is less than 7 means x will be the smaller numbers. Smaller than 7 would go to the left. Title of the first section is Solving. Multi-step. Inequalities. First problem is 4d plus 7 less than or equal to 23. And again, we want to solve for the variable, get d by itself. To get d by itself, we want to first get rid of the positive 7. Get rid of a adding 7, we can subtract 7 on both sides. 4d would come down. The 7s would cancel. The inequality would stay the same. If you add or subtract a number, it does not switch. And 23 minus 7 would be 16. Second step to solve. 4 times d. To get rid of the 4, we can divide by 4. The 4 would cancel. The inequality again does not switch. If we divide by a positive number, it only switches if you divide by a negative number. And 16 divided by 4 would be 4. Since the instructions are just to solve, we do not have to graph this inequality. So the answer to the question would be d is less than or equal to 4. Second question and last question for the section. We have 5 is less than or equal to 11 plus 3h. Again, we want to solve for h. So the first step would be to get rid of this positive 11. To do that, we can subtract 11 on both sides. 5 minus 11 would be negative 6. With different signs, we'll subtract the numbers. 11's bigger, so we'll keep the negative sign on it. Inequality would stay the same, since we're just subtracting a number. And 3h would come down. The 11's would cancel. And last step, 3 times h. To get rid of the 3, we can divide by 3. Negative 6 divided by 3 would be negative 2. And we're dividing by a positive 3. Again, dividing by a positive number does not change the inequality. It's only when you divide by a negative number. 3's would cancel, and h would come down. Final answer to the question, we'll have negative 2 less than or equal to h. Next section of notes is titled More, Multi-Step, Inequalities. First problem is negative 3x minus 4 less than or equal to 14. We want to get x by itself. The first step would be to get rid of the minus 4, which we can do so by adding 4 on both sides. Negative 3x would come down. The 4's would cancel. Less than or equal to 14 plus 4 would be 18. The inequality again does not switch if you add or subtract a number. Last step, negative 3 times x. To get rid of a negative 3 that we're multiplying, you can divide by negative 3. So the negative 3's would cancel. X would come down. And remember, anytime you divide by a negative number, the inequality would switch around. 18 divided by negative 3 would be negative 6. Again, the instructions do not say the graph, so we do not have to graph this inequality. The answer would be x is greater than or equal to negative 6. Last question for this section. Negative 4x minus 2 less than 8. First step to get x by itself will be get rid of the minus 2, which we can add 2 to both sides. Negative 4x would come down. And again, if you add or subtract a number, the inequality would stay the same. 8 plus 2 would be 10. And the last step, we have negative 4 times x. To get rid of multiplying by negative 4, we can divide by negative 4. The negative 4's would cancel. X would come down. And again, if you divide by a negative number, the inequality would switch around. Negative 4 does not go into 10, but we can reduce this fraction. Each number we can divide by 2. 10 divided by 2 would be 5, and negative 4 divided by 2 would be negative 2. So our final answer, x is greater than negative 5 over 2. The first equation, 3 times parentheses 2x minus 4, can be simplified by multiplying the 3 inside the parentheses. 3 times 2x would be 6x, and 3 times a negative 4 would be minus 12, and both equations are equal to negative 18. So both equations are equivalent or equal. When multiplying inside the parentheses, that would be C, the distributive property of multiplication over addition. Looking for the false statement. Letters B and C, when you add whole numbers or rational numbers, the order does not matter. And letter D, when you multiply two rational numbers, the order when you multiply does not matter. The correct answer for the false statement is letter A. When you subtract two whole numbers or subtract any two numbers, the order does matter when you're subtracting. So letter A would be false. First part of the problem is the square root or radical 16. A number times itself that's equal to 16 would be 4. Adding to that, the cube root of 8, when you have a 3 outside the radical sign, that means the cube root or a number times itself 3 times, that's 8. In this case, 2 times 2 times 2 would equal 8, so the cube root of 8, the number times itself 3 times as 8, would be 2. So the square root of 16 is 4, the cube root of 8 is 2, 4 plus 2 would be 6, so the correct answer would be B. Looking for the equivalent or equal expression of x to the 6 times x squared. X to the 6 times x squared could be simplified to x to the 8th. X to the 6 times x squared, we add the exponents, and there's 8 x's, or x to the 8th. First answer A would have a total of 7 x's, which would be incorrect. Letter B, adding the exponents, the correct answer would also be x to the 8th. And C and D would be incorrect, since we'd have 10 x's and 12 x's, which would be x to the 10th and x to the 12th. The correct answer, B, x to the 5th, x to the 3rd, is the same as x to the 8th. To find a reciprocal, we'll take a fraction and flip that fraction upside down. Letter A, the number -1. We can first make a fraction by putting a 1 on the bottom, and flipping the fraction upside down would be 1 over -1, which will be the reciprocal. Letter B, 0. To make it a fraction again, we can add a 1 on the bottom. Flipping the fraction upside down, 1 over 0. If you remember, any fraction with a 0 on the denominator is undefined or not a real number. So the correct answer, which does not have a reciprocal, would be letter B. The reciprocal of C would be 1000 over 1, and D would be 1 over 3. So the correct answer is B. The multiplicative inverse is the fraction that you multiply to get rid of the fraction, which is the same as the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 1 over 2 would be 2 over 1. And the correct answer, 2 over 1, is the same as D, 2. To solve a absolute value equation, we can first take off the absolute values when the absolute value is by itself. So we'll have 2x minus 3 is equal to 5. Solving this equation, we can add 3 to both sides. 2x would equal 8. And dividing by 2, we'll have the first answer, x equals 4. Looking at the possible solutions, letter A has x equals 4, and letter C has x equals 4. So we know the answer cannot be B or D, since neither one has x equals 4. To find the second solution, going back to the original inequality, 2x minus 3, and taking off the absolute value signs, instead of equaling to 5, the absolute value could also be the opposite, negative 5. Adding 3 to both sides, we'll have 2x equals negative 5 plus 3 would be negative 2. And dividing by 2, we'll have the second answer, negative 2 divided by 2 would be negative 1. So the two answers, correct answer would be C, x equals negative 1, and x equals 4. To find the solution for the inequality, we can first isolate or get the absolute value by itself. The positive 5, we can move to the opposite side by subtracting 5. So we'll have negative absolute value of x plus 4 less than or equal to negative 3 minus 5 would be negative 8. And again, to isolate or get the absolute value by itself, to cancel out the negative in front of the absolute value, we can divide by negative 1. So the absolute value of x plus 4 is less than or equal to negative 8 divided by negative 1 would be positive 8. And also when we divide by negative, we'll change the inequality backwards. So we'll have greater than or equal to 8. To solve, we can take the absolute value signs off. X plus 4 is greater than or equal to 8. Subtracting 4 on both sides, we'll have the first answer of x is greater than or equal to positive 4. Looking at the possible answers, letter A and B do not have 4 in the answer, so it'd be incorrect. Letter C has the partial answer of x is less than or equal to 4, but our first answer is x is greater than or equal to 4. Since C is not greater than or equal to 4, it cannot be C. And by process of elimination, the correct answer would be D, x is greater than or equal to 4. And if you wanted to solve the second answer, we can change the 8 to a negative 8. And by subtracting 4 from negative 8, you'll get the second answer of negative 12. To find the equivalent equation, we can begin to solve or simplify the equation until it matches up with one of the 4 possible answers. The first step, when we have parentheses, we can distribute or multiply the negative 2. 5x would stay the same. Negative 2 times 7x would be negative 14x. Negative 2 times a positive 1 would be minus 2, and equals 14x. Checking to see it does not match up with any of the solutions so far. So continuing to simplify, combining like terms, 5x minus 14x would be negative 9x. Minus 2 would stay the same, and equals 14x would stay the same. And again, looking at the answers to see if this matches up. Letter A has the same answer, negative 9x minus 2 equals 14x. So the correct answer would be letter A. Simplifying the equation, we can first distribute the 4 inside the parentheses. 4 times 2 would be 8, and 4 times a negative 5x would be negative 20x, equals 6 would stay the same, and distributing the second parentheses by multiplying by negative 3. Negative 3 times 1 would be minus 3, and negative 3 times a negative 3x would be positive 9x. The first step to the solution does not match up with any of the answers, so we can continue to simplify. 8 minus 20x would stay the same. Combining like terms, 6 minus 3 would be 3, plus 9x. And again, this step does not match up with any solutions, so we can continue to simplify. Moving all the variables to the left-hand side of the equation, we can subtract 9x on both sides. Negative 20x minus 9x would be negative 29x. And at the same time, if we want to, the 8, we can move to the opposite side by subtracting 8 on both sides. 3 minus 8 would be negative 5. And again, looking at the possible solutions, this does not match up with any of these solutions so far. But if you look at letter C, it's the same equation, but both sides have a negative. If you want to, you can divide by negative 1 on both sides, and that'll change it to a positive 29x and a positive 5. So the correct answer would be C. Simplifying the equation to find the equivalent or same equation. Inside the brackets, we have parentheses. So we'll simplify the parentheses first, which are inside the brackets. Multiplying or distribute the negative 4 first. The 3 would stay the same outside of the bracket. The 7x would stay the same. And distributing the negative 4 times x would be negative 4x. And negative 4 times a negative 3 would be positive 12. Closing the brackets, we'll then have plus 1 and equals 16. Looking at the possible solutions, does not match up with any of the solutions so far, so we can continue to simplify. The 3 would stay the same inside the brackets. Combining like terms, 7x minus 4x would be 3x plus 12. And closing the brackets, we'll have plus 1 equals 16. Continuing to simplify, distributed property, 3 times 3x would be 9x. And 3 times 12 would be 36. Plus 1 and equals 16. Looking at the possible solutions again, does not match up with the equations. But if we simplify one more step, combining like terms, 36 plus 1 would be 37. 9x plus 37 equals 16, matches up with letter B. Given the equation, C equals 120 plus 60n, and the total cost is 360, so C would be 360. We can rewrite the equation 360 equals 120 plus 60n. Solving for n, we can find the number of days the sailboat was rented. To solve for n or isolate n, we can first get rid of the 120 by subtracting 120 on both sides. 360 minus 120 would be 240. Canceling the 120s, we'll have 60n equals 240. And last step, we can divide by 60 on both sides. So n equals 240 divided by 60. These zeros we can cancel, and we'll have 24 divided by 6 which would be the correct answer B, 4. Looking at the equation and looking for the first incorrect step or the first mistake. The original question, we can distribute the 3 inside the parentheses. 3 times x would match up with 3x, and 3 times 5 would match up with 15. The right hand side stays the same, so step 1 would be correct. Moving on, the next step, if we combine variables on opposite sides, we'll subtract 2x on both sides. 3x minus 2x would not be 5x. Instead of adding 3x plus 2x, we should be subtracting 2x on both sides. So the first incorrect step would be on step 2. So the correct answer would be B, step 2. To solve the rope problem and find the length of the longest piece of rope, we can first draw a picture or draw a rope. The question states that the rope is 120 feet long and the rope is cut into 3 pieces. If we make 2 cuts, we'll have 3 sections or 3 pieces of rope. The second sentence says the first piece of rope is twice as long as the second piece of rope. If the first piece is twice as long as the second piece, what that means is the first piece is double the length of the second. So the second piece, if we label as x, the first piece would be double that, which would be 2x. The next sentence says the third piece of rope is 3 times as long as the second piece of rope. The second piece of rope we label as x, so 3 times as long would be 3x. Write an equation and we can find the length of the longest piece of rope. The 3 pieces of rope, if we add up 2x plus 3x, that would be the total length of the rope, and that would equal 120. 2x plus 1 more x plus 3x would be 6x, and 6x equals the length of the entire original rope, which would be 120. Solving for x, we can divide by 6, and x equals 12 divided by 6 would be 2, bringing the 0 down, x would be 20. 20 is not the correct answer though. 20 is the answer for x. The question states, what's the length of the longest piece of rope? The longest piece of rope that we had was 3x, or 3 times 20. So the correct answer in this case would be C, 3 times 20, 60 feet for the longest piece of rope. To solve for the number of days or number of hours that we can rent the crane, we can write an equation to solve. The crane costs $750 per day plus $250 per hour of use. So the flat rate of $750, we'll add on to that $250 for every hour of use. And for algebra, we can do $250 times the variable x, which will tell us the cost per hour plus the original cost of $750. The maximum the crane can be used for $2,500 per day to not exceed. If we set that equal to $2,500,